Okay, folks, as we are coming in and finding all the different ways that we're going to be together, the ways that we're going to sit, stand, some of it's purely internal, and on that it's between you, your conscience, and spiritual powers that we have very little control over. But for physical disposition, there could be quite a lot more people looking to gather and find their way in. So please let us invite us as we gather to fill in many of the seats that are in the middle of rows. Those are pretty much a whole open row in the front. And if we do that now, it'll make life a little bit easier for Kolotniks that are still on the way to gather, maybe remembering just 10 days ago, maybe we're a little mixed up. Looking out, not everybody here gathered with a Kolot here in person, and I have no idea who is out there on the live stream, but we don't all look alike. We vary in size, in all kinds of ways. And then we make choices also. This day, Yom Kippur, beginning tonight with Kol Nidre, perhaps more than many other times, we enter a strange world, a world that my first training in mathematical physics knows nothing about, the world of ritual. What are the signs? What are the symbols that resonate for us, that invite us onwards, invite us inwards, that deepen? For some among us, the arena of ritual speaks very loudly and takes us deep. For some among us, perhaps the tangible rituals, they're not so clear. They don't resonate. Maybe it is a melody, a word, or a thought. It seems to me, perhaps, that the very name of this kehillah, this holy congregation, Kolot, many voices, allows us to bring our different approaches together. And so there are different arenas of ritual. In a moment, I'll invite whoever wishes to join me in putting on a talit. For some of us, being enveloped in this ancient garb with 4 fringes deepens our sense of being embraced, but not all of us. For some of us, the fast that we undertake for about 24 3/4 hours, give or take a little, that stimulates us to journey in a different way. For others, it is not a choice that is possible. And for others, it simply isn't the right choice. I invite everyone to be very clear that where there is any compelling factor, especially, don't imagine that the frame of mind is, oh, I really wanted to, and I couldn't. The frame of mind is, if you need to eat or drink on Yom Kippur, feel that that too is a part of the mitzvah, a part of the deed. Because the Torah doesn't say, fast for 25 hours. It says, ve'initem et nafshatechem. And the word ve'initem is related to the Hebrew word of humble. So the real ritual journey is not the white clothes that speak to some of us, that our daughter Miriam was adopted from Guatemala, so I chose to break the white a little bit. It's not the fast, it's not the talit, it's the way that we engage with those symbols. So let me share a couple of things that's important for us to know together. For those gathered here together in safety, I invite us all just for a moment be aware of where the emergency exits are. Sometimes in an emergency, our instinct is to go out the way we came in, and it might not be the best route. If it's needed, we will get good, clear guidance. And we thank everyone for keeping your masks on while you are with us, unless you're speaking or singing up here on the bima. Families with little ones, we're glad big ones and little ones are here, and we've said it before. We welcome a goodly amount of sound. Anybody, in my view, under about 6 or 7 gets a free pass. At the point where things are disrupting other people, let's all use good judgment and kindness. If you're coming up here to the bima, the stage, come stage left, house right, that's that way, and follow the signs. That should work. And as more people might be joining us, please squish in. We could be very full. There's no blessing for putting on the talit. My friend Arthur Waskow, the great passionate advocate for social justice, reminds us of the Kabbalah Weise Gloria, that we live in four worlds, and the four corners of a talus are meant to remind us that we bring tachlis, action, and concept, and formation, and the transcendent, and we bring them together. So, those who wish, please join me to put on a talit. Think about our ways into ritual as we journey into word, melody, text, and motion. Invite our friend Brett, who's one of the few people not quite as new as me. If Brett Parker would come to share in the ritual of adding a little to the light, to the flames, the luminescence that guides us.
Brett, you're over there. We need you behind the scenes. So we're going to move over to candle lighting with you, Brett. We're on page 9 if you're joining us in the prayer. Come. Come. Here, light candles. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, etzivanu lehadlik ner shel Yom HaKippurim.
Chag Sameach, Good Yantiv. So nice to see everybody here. I'm Brett Reed Parker. I am the new-ish executive director of Kolot Chayeinu, and I'm just thrilled to be here with you all. This moment, the very beginning of the Kol Nidre service, was my favorite part of the high holidays growing up. We'd all just had a big meal in preparation for the fast. We were in a sort of a food coma. Nobody was hangry yet. We were all chilled and relaxed. It was early days. We weren't flipping through the pages of the Machzor trying to see how many were left yet. And as I got older, this remained a favorite moment for me in the whole high holiday cycle, because we're about to recite a litany of transgressions, and I know that I didn't do all of them. And so I would look around and I'd think, one of you guys did. And that, to me, is so much of the beauty of Judaism. It's, it's not an it's not a first-person singular project. It's not an I project. It's a we project. It's a collective. And that is so much of what Kolot Chayeinu is all about. I mean, it's in our very name, Chayeinu, voices of our lives. And so you, me, we, all of us, we are part of this collective us, this collective we, for which we share collective responsibility and which we build together. And whether you've been here for 30 years or whether this is the first time you've been with Kolot Chayeinu, you are we. We are we. And I'm just so happy to be here together with all of the we, and I thank you all for your attendance, for your participation, for your support, for all of the incredible volunteer work. And just as a last thought, as I'm thanking folks, I have to thank our long-suffering, hard-working, ultra-dedicated staff who have been working for months and months to make this happen. And so much goes on behind the scenes. And when you see your Kolot staff members, please give them a big thank you, because without them, none of this would have happened. So thanks for being part of the we, and Chag Sameach, everyone.
I'm going to talk about this later at different points in our service. But I'll say I love Yom Kippur. I think it's a privilege and a joy and an opportunity to reflect on our lives together, so I'm smiling quite a lot. And if you are coming to this night, I know that there might be joy for you in being in community, and I know there also might be heavy hearts, because it can be a very, very heavy thing to face the year behind us and to face the year ahead. And we hold all of it as part of our collective story. And I'll also just say that as you hear, unfortunately we have this issue with the sound that's beyond our control. If you've ever taken a meditation class and there's been noise outside the window and they say, incorporate it into the meditation, I'll invite you to, it's kind of like a crackling fire a little bit, so we're just at the fireside. At this time, I'm going to invite quite a few folks who are here on the Bima with us, which is the leaders of Kolot's Oral History Project and many of our Torah study leaders, to rise. In just a moment, we're going to open the Ark together. We'll be on page 16. And I'll say that these two projects, one newer, one since Kolot's inception, have both lifted up the Torah of this community in so many ways that are still unfolding. And it is a blessing what you have done and what you continue to do. We are on page 16. We turn to Or Zarua. I invite you to rise as we open the Ark, rise in body or in spirit, in person or at home. We turn now to the prayer that this name gets its night for, and we'll invite you to remain standing as you're able in body or in spirit for the recitation of Kol Nidre. On Kol Nidre, we lift up our Torahs and we set down false oaths and promises. And we consider that which we will carry with us into the new year and that which we will choose to let go of, everything that we set behind. From last Yom Kippur to this one, what are you carrying with you that you want to keep carrying? What do you choose? What weight do you choose to keep holding? And what ways of being, what ways of coping that were perhaps necessary for a time are no longer what you want to hold? That is not the weight for you to carry in your hands and in your heart anymore. We set these things down. We'll now hear 3 repetitions of Kol Nidre. The tradition we follow is that we move from the softest, most internal voice to the loudest, fullest collective repetition. And so this night we'll first hear, can't release it yet. So this night we'll first hear Kolotnik and rabbinical student Hadar Ahuvia, who's here with us to lead the first rendition. The second rendition, a little louder, from our cantor. And then the third rendition, the cantor will lead us, but we will all sing together. On page 18. You know, we set so much aside. Set it aside. The shtus, the details, it didn't work, it's not working, it's not the point. We turn on page 18 to Kol Nidre.
Kol Nidre
Esarei v'charamei Shavuotan Allah,
In a moment, we'll now take these Torahs off of our bima and we bring them into the community, into the kahal. And as we do so, we'll sing Lo Vashamayim Hi, it is not in heaven. Sorry. Torah belongs to us all. We take the Torah out of the ark and off the bima and carry it into the community in this way. And for folks at the balcony, we sort of will send the Torah love up for you gesturally, and same with the folks at home. This is a serious night, but it can also be a night of gratitude and blessing. We reflect deeply on our lives, not as a punishment, and I think perhaps not to inflict any suffering, but we do it under the assumption that change is possible, which is such an optimistic and joyful thing to get to be witness to and part of. We'll sing, "It is not in heaven," or at least it is not in heaven alone, because it is in our hands to change.
Yeah, maybe, unless this is working. Is this working? Thank you. Follow along in the supplement. Lo v'shamayim, lo v'shamayim, lo v'shamayim hi. Lo v'shamayim, ki karov lachem me'od. In the time of our asking questions beyond words, in the time of our singing songs that won't be heard. It is not beyond the sea, it is not a world apart. It is in your mouth. It is in your heart. Lo v'shamayim, lo v'shamayim, lo v'shamayim hi. Lo v'shamayim, ki karov lachem me'od. Lo v'shamayim, lo v'shamayim, lo v'shamayim hi. Lo v'shamayim, ki karov lachem me'od. In a time of thanksgiving, when blessings flow like rain, in a time of our healing, in a time where hope remains. No, it is not beyond the sea, it is not a world apart. It is in your mouth. It is in your heart. Lo
נסלח לכל הדת בני ישראל ולגר הגר בתוכם וכל העם בשגגה בשגגה סלח נא לעוונם הזה כי גודל חסדך וכאשר נשאת לעם הזה ממצרים ועד הנה ושם נאמר ויאמר אדוני סלחתי כדבריך ויאמר אדוני סלחתי כדבריך ויאמר אדוני סלחתי כדבריך. As we return the Torahs to the ark, we sing Shehechianu. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Shehechianu v'kimanu v'higianu lazman hazeh. We are on page 22 for the Baruch Hu. You can be seated. We're going to turn to page 26. I'm going to invite Brett to come up and take away these 3 mics and see which one of them might work a little bit later in the service. And in the meantime, we will share. Like Shanah likes to share. Page 26. Ahavat olam Beit Yisrael amcha ahavta Torah u'mitzvot, chukim u'mishpatim, otanu limadeta. Al kein Adonai Eloheinu, b'shochbeinu u'vekumeinu, nasiach b'chukecha, v'nismach b'divrei Toratecha, u'v'mitzvotecha, le'olam va'ed, ki heim chayeinu ve'orech yameinu, ve'orech yameinu, uvahem nege yomam v'layla, yomam v'layla. V'atakal tasir mimenu le'olamim, Baruch atah Adonai, Ohev amo Yisrael. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai echad, Baruch Shem Kevod, Malchuto le'olam va'ed, Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha, b'chol levavecha, u'b'chol nafshecha, u'b'chol me'odecha, ve'hayu hadvarim ha'ele, asher anochi mitzavecha, hayom al levavecha, ve'shinatam levadecha, v'dibartam, ve'shitecha ve'techa, u'letecha b'derech, u'shofecha u'vkumecha, u'kshartam leot al yadecha, ve'hayu letotafot b'neinecha, u'tavtam al mezuzot beitecha, u'v'hisharecha. Leman tizkeru v'asitem et kol mitzvotai, Yitzem kedoshim Elohechem, Ahani Adonai Elohechem, Asher hotzeti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim, liot lachem Elohim, Ani Adonai Elohechem. Emet, emet. Page 40, can you hear me? That's okay. I think we're going to go to page 40. Micham mocham bailim Adonai, Mikam mocha nedar b'kodesh, Nora, Nora, Tehillah, Tehillah, Oseh, Oseh, Fele, Fele, Nora, Nora, Tehillah, Tehillah, Oseh, Oseh, Fele, Micham mocha bailim Adonai, Micham mocha nedar b'kodesh. We'll turn to page 45. Yitkadal, likadal, Shemei Rabbah, ve'almad ivrach irutei, ve'amlich malchutei, ve'chayechon u'byomechon, u'v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, ba'gala u'bizman karib, v'imeru, Amen. Yehi Shmei Rabbah mevorach le'olam olam ve'omaya yitzbarach yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitba'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitala v'yitalal Shemei de'kudesha b'rechu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata damiran b'yalma v'imeru amen.
Sharing, such a great thing. So, some resources we are abundantly wealthy in. Kind hearts, good humor. Microphones, maybe not so much at this moment. So we are, as my friends in Texas told me to say, we are fixing to move towards the Amidah, the core prayer. But part of that fixing process, we invite our community president, Ann Sherman, the director of lifelong learning, Jess Moore, and members of the chorus, and Shalva Wise, Adam Lane, and Ty Zeitament, please make your way through these steps quietly. That's what the script says, to the bima. There's a paradox in prayer and in the way we approach Yom Kippur. One part of it, there's a little piece of us that thinks, from Rosh Hashanah until now, we had time to look inside, to repent, to do what we needed to do, to make those awful Elul phone calls. You all know, I mentioned them on Shabbos. We all know what are the phone calls that we don't want to make. And that Yom Kippur loomed on the horizon. Do it before Kol Nidre. And here we are. One little moment of public confession. I did not make it all the way down my list of the phone calls I didn't want to make. I did some of them, not all. It's not all done. But we're not completely lost. The very words of Kol Nidre tell us that we can make commitments. And the calls I didn't make yesterday and the day before, I will do before Sukkot. I really will. The Machzor, the prayer book, this is the script. These are the organized words. The phone calls, no script. That makes them worse. And in a moment when we come to the arena of prayer, you choose script, no script. My teacher, Lionel Blue, of blessed memory, wrote these words to guide us into this process on this day of Yom Kippur. Lionel uses stark language. He was the first rabbi to come out as gay in the United Kingdom and Europe. And he knew about judgment. He felt it, but there were moments when he embraced and wrote about it. He writes, "We are judged every moment of our life by what we have done and what we have left undone. This is the judgment of truth from which we flee, and we put in its place our own judgment, which is partial, or the judgment of the world, which is worthless. If we care for our souls and seek eternity, then now is the time for that judgment of truth we pushed aside. Without that truth, we cannot go forward. If we reject it, we cannot grow. Today, Hayom, this day, supported by all the communities of Israel and this our own community, accompanied by the confessions of our neighbors and the memorials of the honest and sincere of former times, we can begin to face destiny and its demands. Living through a lifetime or a century of years does not help us to eternity. The time alone will not enlighten us. But one day of insight, just one day, 1 hour, 1 moment, can carry us forward to the eternal life we seek. You, God, you have given us, all of us, our chance this day. It is not in heaven, it is in our midst, and let us take that chance and take it now. Ki im lo achshav ematai. If not now, then when? And we turn into this time of prayer. You will find the words on page 46 in the Machzor, as we're able, in body, mind, spirit, gathered here at home, we rise to our duty.
And we again want to invite Jess Moore to make her way up to the bima if she's here. וכן תן כבוד אדוני לעמך, תהילה ליראך. ולכן צדיקים יראו וישמחו וישרים יעלוזו. ותמלוך אתה אדוני לבדך על כל מעשיך, בהר ציון משכן כבודך, ובירושלים עיר קודשך, ככתוב בדברי קודשך. ימלוך אדוני לעולם אלוהי ציון, לדור ודור, הללויה. קדוש אתה ונורא שמך, ואין אלוה מבלעדיך, ככתוב, ויקבע אדוני צבאות במשפט, והאל הקדוש נקדש בצדקה. ברוך אתה אדוני המלך הקדוש. Take time at your own pace, the words on the page, the words on your heart, up until 78. Page 78, these words. בספר חיים ברכה ושלום ופרנסה טובה ניזכר וניכתב לפניך, אנחנו וכל עמך בית ישראל לחיים טובים ושלום. בספר חיים ברכה ושלום ופרנסה טובה נזכר וניגתיו לפניך, אנחנו וכל עמך בית ישראל, לחיים טובים ושלום.
And we invite Ann Sherman, the president of this congregation, in its organized way, please to come share some words, maybe a request with our community.
Gamar Tov. It is so good to be here with all of you tonight. Before I start my pitch, I want to extend my deep appreciation on behalf of the board to our wonderful clergy, Rabbi Miriam Grossman, Cantor Lisa B. Siegel, and our interim rabbi, Rabbi Sammy Barth, and our exceptional staff, Executive Director Brett Parker, and the team, which includes Hara Connell, Sarah Sanders, Alyssa Vinnick, Jess Moore, Jen Abrams, Forrest Smotrick-Barr, Malky Grzalski, Thomas Conklin, and Victor Ortiz, all of whom have poured so much of themselves into making it possible for us to be together during the days of awe. Thank you all. Yes, let's give it up for all these beautiful people. A couple of Shabbats ago, I was at services and had the privilege, as I have had several times over the past few years, of being part of a group aliyah from Rabbi Miriam. Actually, at this particular service, I got two. Both were amazing. They always are. The second blessing had to do with getting ready for the High Holy Days. And Rabbi Miriam said something that really stayed with me, that we, those of us on the bima that morning, and more broadly we, the members of Kolot Chayeinu, are involved in a collective process of making something radical happen. That stayed with me, and I didn't know what to do with it. I don't think of myself as someone who makes radical things happen. In fact, the circumstances of my life, to a great extent, make it possible for me to go through life not thinking about making radical things happen. And honestly, before that aliyah 2 weeks ago, radical for me meant wearing white out in public on September 24th, well after Labor Day. But here we are. I did crowdsource my question to a bunch of fellow Kolotniks, asking them what does it mean to them to be part of a collective process of making something radical happen here at Kolot. And so I'm going to share some of their responses. Joseph wrote that Kolot is the place where I don't have to dream of a better world. I get to make it in collaboration with other people. I get to be my whole self, religious and questioning, non-binary, queer, anti-Zionist, a convert. I spend the majority of my day hiding and masking, but at Kolot, I get to be the truest parts of myself. Sierra shared, while no member community can be everything for everyone, Kolot does a spectacular job of making space for those that may have not found a Jewish home before. We strive every day to reflect the community we are, and maybe more importantly, the community we hope to become. That is a reflection of the radical love we share as a collective space. And this from Lisa. Ernst and I joined Kolot in 1998 when our children, now long identifying as Jews of color, were 2 and 9. I wanted a place where I could engage fully, and for our children, we wanted a place where their belonging would never be questioned. I didn't know I was signing up to help make this radical thing happen, building and sustaining a Jewish experience that would enable all members of Kolot, including my children, walk through any Jewish world and feel fully authentic, even if other Jews told us we didn't belong there. Another parent chimed in that the CLP program, our Children's Learning Program, has made it possible for kids to develop their Jewish identity with a sense of radical possibility. There's no imposed doctrine about what the word God means. There's no mandated support for Israel or Zionism, no prescribing prayer or what it should be. My child learned that being Jewish can mean being free to question all and to seek joy and justice everywhere. Rebecca shared that for the longest time, Kolot was one of the only synagogues in the country where anti-Zionists could really feel fully part of the community. Over time, members of our clergy, lay leadership, and membership have come to be more confidently and proudly anti-Zionists. Parts of the community, not everyone, and it's exciting to think of how Kolot's radical rethinking of Jewish community can continue to evolve. One more example. Arthur and Laura separately wrote about this beautiful thing that happened last weekend over Rosh Hashanah. Those of you who were at services will remember that Kolot was swatted with a false threat of a pipe bomb, like dozens of Jewish congregations. And in response, on the next day, day 2 of Rosh Hashanah, there was, in Arthur's words, a cordon of allies surrounding our shofar service in the park, people trained in bystander intervention and de-escalation. Some were Kolot members, others were volunteers organized by JFREJ, many of them Muslim. Laura referred to that moment as the result of building loving partnerships that tie together our commitment to radical love, radical change, and solidarity. And here's something else that stuck with me. In the Rosh Hashanah Drash she gave in 2017 with her wife and Kolot founder Rabbi Ellen Littman, Catherine Conroy said that the only rule I have experienced at Kolot is that one person cannot oppress another. Now, Catherine didn't explicitly use the word radical, but in a world that seems to reward oppression, what is more radical than that? What I take from all these reflections is that Kolot is radical in part because we are loved as Jews and as humans for who we are. We are seen and cherished for who we are as individuals, and believe me, we are a lot. But because of Kolot, we're not just individuals. We hold up, we challenge, and we love one another and our community and our world. So if that is radical, yes, please count me in. It is a privilege and something I'm occasionally daunted by, but always grateful for. And while I'm here, I'll say that we're together in this place tonight because of Kolot's rather radical commitment to be fully open and inclusive, and that extends to literally opening our doors on the high holy days to any and all who want to pray with us and reflect on who we are and to contemplate who we might become in the year ahead. But sure, we can pat ourselves on the back. Oh, I guess though not today. That's not the day. Sorry, scratch that. It's a journey. To keep this, I'm almost there. To keep this radical project going, we need the support of everyone here. Tonight, in fact, we are all 1,000 of us, part of this quirky little community, as Janet Price put it over last Shabbat. The suggested amount is $180 per person, $360 per couple if you're a member, $360 or $720 if you're not. Regardless, as you're making your gift, and I hope you will, I encourage you to reflect on what it means to you to be part of this radically beautiful and quirky Jewish community, even if it's just once a year during these days of awe, and to give accordingly. Gemar Tov.
So, in just a little bit, we'll be moving to this series of prayers on this night and tomorrow that we'll do again that we call the Ashamnu, and the vidui, which includes the al-chetz. All of these things are ways that we reflect on wrongdoing and these litanies that we'll be soon to read. And so we always like to ask someone to come and give us some words of Torah, words of wisdom, before we enter that task together. And so it's my honor and blessing this night to introduce to many of you, I think for the first time, if you're not CLP families, our fabulous new Director of Lifelong Learning, Jess Moore.
Shalom. I'm Jessica Moore. You can call me Jess. I'm the Director of Lifelong Learning here at Kolot since June, so I am new. So I am someone who came to Judaism later in life. Ever since my conversion, I've always tried to continue to study. So not just the years of study you go through for conversion, but I continue. And over the summer, I was invited to study at the Pardes Center in Jerusalem. One of the classes focused on the Mishnah, so Jewish oral law. And one of the focuses is, why do we have these legalities? My takeaway was the importance of the obligation we have to each other. The legal framework was trying to create a pathway to understanding and empathizing with each other, trying to create a type of intergenerational unity for creating a better world. The Vidui uses very strong language. Sorry, I've sinned. Sorry, I've called others to sin. So I thought to the approach writing the message for the Vidui the same way I approach education, and even in my own personal learning, with grace. Then I thought, maybe the Vidui is not entirely about what we've done, but instead instructions on what not to do or caution us on how we act in the future, a reminder of obligations to ourselves and each other. Sometimes prayers and stories highlight what's missing, and I think for the Vidui, it's the responsibility or obligation to give grace. To excuse my language, break bread with each other, even if we disagree, so giving others grace. As the character Sydney Hayes in Orange is the New Black and so many others say, Judaism is about what you do. Judaism is about the present, the now, and how that impacts the future. Not about what you have done, but what you have the possibility to do. How you can grow into being a better person each day. Maybe you were snippy at someone after a bad day. Maybe on the way to shul, you were already cranky and you accidentally moved someone aside. Maybe you're falling asleep right now as I'm saying this, but that's okay. Because the point is, you can continue to make choices. You can say hi to someone new at Shabbat services or tomorrow. You can take breaks when working or studying. Like, as you atone, you can think about ways you can give yourself grace. Judaism is about humanity and seeing the divine spark within us all. So above all, give yourself and others grace. Gamar Chatima Tova.
That was beautiful. Thank you, Jess.
Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu. We're on page 82. Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu. Tavo, tavo lefanecha, tefilatenu. Ve'al titalam mitchinatenu. הזפנים וקשי עורף לומר לפניך, אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו ואמותינו, צדיקים אנחנו ולא חטאנו, אבל אנחנו חטאנו. אשמנו בגדנו, גזלנו, דיברנו דופי, יאי די 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 די, יאי די 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 די, יאי די 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 די, הבינו והרשענו, זדנו, חמסנו, טפלנו שקר, יאי די 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 די, יאי די 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 די, יאי די 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 די, יצנו רע, כזבנו, לצנו, מרדנו, ניאצנו, שררנו, אבינו, כפשענו, יאי די 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 די, יאי די 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 די, יאי די 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 די, צררנו, כשינו עורף, רשענו, שיחתנו, תיעבנו, טעינו, תיתנו, יאי די 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 די, יאי די 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 די, יאי די 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 די. We're going to turn to page 86 and 7. Is this working? Is this one working? על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בזדון ובשגגה, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך בדיבור פה.
The ways we have wronged you deliberately and by mistake, and harm we have caused in your world through the words of our mouths.
על חטא שחטאנו לפניך באימוץ הלב, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך בתפישות פה.
The ways we have wronged you by hardening our hearts, and harm we have caused in your world through careless speech.
על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בכחש ובחסר, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך ברכילות.
The ways we have wronged you through lies and deceit, and harm we have caused in your world through gossip and rumor.
על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בפלילות, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך בזלזול חורים ומורים.
The ways we have wronged you by judging others unfairly, and harm we have caused in your world through disrespect to parents and teachers.
על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בבידוי פה, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך בכונת רע.
The ways we have wronged you through insincere apologies, and harm we have caused in your world by mistreating a friend or neighbor.
על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בחוזק יד, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך במשא ובמתן.
The ways we have wronged you through violence and abuse, and harm we have caused in your world through dishonesty in business.
ועל כולם
take time on your own with the rest of the vidui or in silent reflection.
So we're on page 96, and just want to take a moment to invite us all to sink into the meaning of this piyut, this prayer, liturgical prayer. It's asking that we let our prayers and our songs, ya'aleh, like an aliyah, go up. The prayers are sent to the heavens, and they get a glimpse of what's possible. And then they need to come back down and permeate this world and do their work in this world. It's a great loop. Ya Allah.
Tahanunenu
Is Shalva Wise here? Shalva, are you here? Oh, it's okay. Actually, you're going to be here tomorrow with me. Beautiful. We're on page 98. Shema, Shema Kolenu, Shema Kolenu, hear our prayer. Shema, Shema Kolenu, Shema Kolenu, Adonai Eloheinu, Shema Kolenu, Adonai Eloheinu, Shema Kolenu, Shema, Shema Kolenu, Shema Kolenu, Shema, Shema Kolenu, Shema Kolenu. Page 100. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun, Erech Apayim, V'Rav Chesed V'Emet, Nozer Chesed L'Halafim, Nozer Avon V'Fesha V'Chata V'Nakei, Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun, Erech Apayim, V'Rav Chesed V'Emet, Noser Chesed L'Halafim, Noser Avon V'Fesha V'Chata V'Nakei, Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun, Erech Apayim, V'Rav Chesed V'Emet, Noser Chesed L'Halafim, Noser Avon V'Fesha V'Chata V'Nakei. We're going to turn to Avinu Malkeinu on page 114. And we'll invite you to rise as you're able as we turn to the ark. Avinu Malkeinu, Shema Kolenu. Avinu Malkeinu, Chatanu Lefanecha. Avinu Malkeinu, Chamol Aleinu Ve'al Ol Aleinu V'Tapenu. Avinu Malkeinu, Kale Dever V'Cherev V'Ra'av Me'aleinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Kale Kol Tzar Umastin Me'aleinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Kotvenu B'Sefer Chaim Tovim. Avinu Malkeinu, Chadesh Aleinu Shanah Tovah. Avinu Malkeinu, Malei Yadeinu Mibirchatzecha. Avinu Malkeinu, Harem Keren Ma'eshichecha. Avinu Malkeinu, Na'al Tashivenu Rekam Milfanecha. Avinu Malkeinu, Kabel Berachamim lefilatenu. Avinu Malkeinu, aseh imanu leman shemecha. Avinu Malkeinu, aseh lemancha, im lo lemanenu. Avinu Malkeinu, ein lanu melech ele ata. Avinu Malkeinu, petach sharei shamayim litfilatenu. Avinu Malkeinu, shema kolenu, chus v'rachem aleinu. Avinu Malkeinu, chaneinu v'aneinu. Avinu Malkeinu, chaneinu v'aneinu, ki ein banu masim. Aseh imanu, tzedakah v'chesed. Aseh imanu, tzedakah v'chesed, ve'oshienu. Avinu Malkeinu, chaneinu v'aneinu. Avinu Malkeinu, chaneinu v'aneinu, ki ein banu masim. Aseh imanu, tzedakah v'chesed. Aseh imanu, tzedakah v'chesed, ve'oshienu.
You can be seated. So before I begin, I'll say I am of the school that a drash is a conversation. And so if you hear something and you're feeling it, it's not that you're applauding in performance, it's that you're in conversation, and this drash is very much the continuation of so many conversations with so many of you. So let me hear it. Okay. Well, no, not like that. I just meant like, you know. Or, you know, I'm not trying to control you. All right. On this night, we pray, Ashamnu Bagadnu. We have sinned. We have dealt treacherously. We sing and sing. We sing and pray in the plural. We reflect on the state of the world we share, and we try to change collectively. In this congregation, we try to move away from images of Yom Kippur as a day of punishment and dread, as we might find in some, not all, parts of our liturgy. But dread and awe is something I think many of us do feel when on this night we face the most harrowing crises of our time, and we ask ourselves, how will we keep going? How will we rise in the face of catastrophe? And catastrophe is everywhere, most strikingly with the climate crisis and its destruction of entire towns and ecosystems already, but also the collapse of the right to safe abortions, safe and accessible abortions in so many states, the criminalization of gender-affirming care for trans youth, the rise of white supremacist violence, horrific economic inequality in our city streets, and more and more. There is so much to face. The hope and power of this night is to propel us towards making change together. But sometimes we get stuck just looking at the wreckage of the past. In the wake of real destruction, personal, collective, environmental, how do we keep going? How do we avoid succumbing to nihilism, denial, or any other kind of stasis? Or put more plainly, in a very broken world, when there is so much work to be done, what can stop us from giving up on change? Rabbi Alan Liu of blessed memory taught that Yom Kippur can help us to face our lives and make change, but we must start this process on Tisha B'Av, the holiday where we mark the destruction of the temple and which comes 7 weeks before Rosh Hashanah. In his book about the days of awe, This is Real and You Are Completely Unprepared, Liu writes, what is required of us at Tisha B'Av is a simple turn of mind, a turn towards consciousness, a turn away from denial, from the inertia, from the passive momentum of our lives, a turn away from those things that continue to happen to us unconsciously, and a conscious decision to change, a letting go and a turning towards that which remains. He argues that Tisha B'Av is the beginning of a turn, of a process towards consciousness and change, and that we hope to complete that turn and that process this night on Yom Kippur and tomorrow. But let's be honest, let's be real. Most American Jewish communities outside of the Orthodox world do not start the process of reflection on Teshuvah on Tisha B'Av. Most folks aren't observing Tisha B'Av. So tonight I offer you Tisha B'Av and Yom Kippur together. Perhaps in order to access what Yom Kippur can really teach us tonight, we might first need the lessons of Tisha B'Av. So I want to share a teaching about the destruction of the temple that I have personally been anchored by and motivated by for many years. And I also share this particular story tonight because these are my final weeks as Kolot's rabbi, and this is one of my all-time favorite Jewish stories, and I just have not taught it before, so I just had to. It's about how we move from chaos and loss to transformation, even when that might seem impossible to do. In Eicha Rabbah, the rabbis told mournful and highly provocative midrashim, or rabbinic stories, about the destruction of the temple and its aftermath. When the Roman army destroyed the temple, they also engaged in a mass killing of the Jewish population. Very few people were left, and for the survivors who were then also not enslaved by the Roman Empire, those people who remained, for many of them, They feared there was no more way to access God without the Holy Temple. Eventually, all this destruction catalyzed the beginning of the birth of the rabbinic era and the evolution of the Judaism we practice today, as I spoke about on Rosh Hashanah. Out of that chaos, the rabbis who had already begun to build a new way of Jewish life in the diaspora became the leaders of the Jewish people. Looking back, we can see the birth of Judaism as we know it. Judaism, what it is to us, that happened in 70 CE, but for most Jews in 70 CE, it was the apocalypse. It was the end of everything. The people were certain God had abandoned them, that God had allowed this catastrophe as punishment for their sins. In chapter 4 of Eicha Rabbah, the rabbis wrote about the destruction with the following story. They said, This is like a king who made a chuppah, a wedding canopy for his son. And he cemented it, and he plastered it, and he decorated it. And his son got up to terrible mischief, and immediately, without hesitation, the king went to the chuppah, and with his bare hands, he tore down the curtains, and he smashed the reed rods. The son's teacher, the pedagogue, lifted up a broken reed, and he held the reed as a flute, and he began to play a song. And as he played his flute, the townspeople said to the pedagogue, "The king has destroyed his son's chuppah, and you sit and you make music?" And the pedagogue said, "I sing because the king destroyed his son's chuppah, but he did not pour out his wrath on his son." So too the people said, "The Holy One, blessed be he, destroyed the temple, and you sing?" And he said to them, "I sing because it is better that the Holy One, blessed be he, poured out his wrath on wood and stones and dirt, and not upon the Jewish people." It's upsetting and not unusual to read a story where the Jewish people are represented as a wayward son or prince and are then punished by an angry father for our sins. I think our ancestors may have felt that this kind of theology, perhaps that it gave their experiences of trauma and violence some kind of order, some sense, some purpose. I think we can have compassion for the writers of this story, even as we also reject any theology that says God causes violence and chaos in our lives because of sin. We can have compassion for the writers of this story, even as we reject any theology that justifies abusive parenting. Because I think there is so much more to this story than the king. I love this midrash because of what happens when we turn away from just the big, flashy, angry, look-at-me king to the pedagogue. The character whose captivating behavior has stayed with me for years. The pedagogue picks up the pieces of the destroyed chuppah and makes music. And by all interpretations of the story, the pedagogue is understood to represent the rabbis themselves. The pedagogue takes the remnants, the pieces that can be salvaged from the wreckage, and makes them sing. The pedagogue turns debris into instrument. Just as the rabbis took the remnants of the Israelite religion that revolved entirely around the temple and animal sacrifice, and they made Talmud, made midrash, just like this one, made prayer and made song and made everything that took root and thrived in the diaspora and everything that we now call Judaism. In other words, when things come crashing down around us, the rabbis ask, what can we still hold in our hands? What can we remake in radically new and vital ways? So much of our world is broken. This midrash asks us, where is the flute, the teacher, the song? So let's first imagine, in the spirit of Yom Kippur, what this story could mean in the wake of personal loss and destruction. We can imagine the ways all kinds of canopies come crashing down in our personal lives. Whether it's mourning the death of a loved one, or the end of a relationship, any kind of relationship we believed would last, the shock of sudden illness or the toll of long-term illness, there are moments of wreckage and confusion when the sturdy things are suddenly not so sturdy anymore. The pedagogue, then, in this case, might be the mentor who has lived this before, the friend who will listen in loving witness, the therapist who will guide us through the work of grief and then healing, the people who show up in community and help us to make sense of what has happened and how to keep going. The flute here might be harder to identify what is the remnant in our personal lives that we don't reject along with the rest of the debris. Perhaps it's a lesson we learn from a challenging person or time. Perhaps it is the love or passion we commit to finding in healthier ways in the future. I want to invite you to consider in your own life when you look to the places that might feel shaky, or for some, when you look to the places that might have collapsed. Who are the pedagogues you might seek out, and what instruments are they carrying? The parable becomes even more powerful when we turn to the collective. And so to turn to the collective, I'm going to come closer. The rabbis initially wrote this midrash about collective survival in the face of extreme collective suffering and turmoil. In our world, there are so many broken canopies, including, as we've already said tonight, our sick planet. The climate crisis is already upon us and has been. Fires in Maui and the Canadian Rockies, extreme flooding in Libya that has already killed thousands and left thousands more missing, unbreathable air in New York City, extreme heat and storms around the world. On facing climate depression and panic, essayist Gia Tolentino writes, "It may be impossible to seriously consider the reality of climate change for longer than 90 seconds without feeling depressed, angry, guilty, grief-stricken, or simply insane. The ice sheets keep melting, the permafrost keeps releasing its methane, and the future continues to harden into a psychic zone of suffering and dread. By mid-century, hundreds of millions of people will be displaced because of global warming. Maybe, here and now, we can understand the abusive father in Eicha Rabbah as something else. Not as God, but as other powers that be. Perhaps now the violent king is a force composed of coal titans, oil lobbyists, and the politicians who enthusiastically or unenthusiastically ally with the fossil fuel industry, all pulling down the curtains and smashing the reeds, devastating the chuppah for the sake of what? Profit and power. But perhaps the king is also something less nefarious and more common. People with power who simply cannot imagine another way. People who accept the way things are as good enough, even when that means ignoring the wreckage that our extractivist economy and energy system has wrought. In this version of the story, the collective one now, who are the pedagogues? Perhaps they are the people who rise up to make something new from the wreckage collectively. I think of groups here in New York City and state fighting for climate justice like Sunrise NYC. Yeah. West Harlem Environmental Action, We Act for Environmental Justice. Groups led by directly impacted youth of color like Uprose, right here in Brooklyn. I think of Jewish organizing bodies like Chayeinu, the Jewish Youth Climate Movement, Native-led climate organizing like Indigenous Climate Action, Indigenous Environmental Network, Honor the Earth, and more. Yeah. And I think of the environmental scientists and teams working to decarbonize our buildings, our transportation systems, and more. There are so many kinds of pedagogues. There is no one path. There is direct action and advocacy, climate law and climate science. There is technical engineering work and the work of new legislation. There is fundraising and donating to maintaining any and all of this vital work. And like the Ashamnu and all the prayers we say on this night in the plural, we are most powerful, most poised to make lasting change when we act as part of a collective. So much is possible beyond the rhetoric of personal responsibility and personal shame. There are so many tangible, material ways for each of us to join in the collective work of environmental justice, climate action, and green energy in this new year. And then, what are the flutes? The radically reimagined new thing we can wrap our hands around when the structures around us start collapsing. In Naomi Klein's book, This Changes Everything, Capitalism versus the Climate, Klein argues that if truly treated as a catastrophic planetary emergency, the climate crisis could become a transformational force for humanity. And that the changes and resources it will take to move away from fossil fuels and to prepare for extreme weather that is already here could radically change our societies for the better. She writes, through conversations in the environmental justice movement, I began to see all kinds of ways that climate change could become a catalyzing force for positive change. How it could be the best argument progressives have ever had to demand rebuilding and reviving our local economies, to reclaim our democracies from coercive corporate influence, to block harmful free trade deals and rewrite old ones, to invest in starving public infrastructure and essential services like energy and water, to take it all back, to remake our sick agricultural system into something much healthier, to open borders to migrants whose displacement is linked to climate impacts, to finally respect indigenous land rights, all of which would help to end grotesque levels of inequity within our nation and between them. Obviously, grief and panic and fear and numbness does not immediately dissipate when this vision is shared. Klein wrote these words almost 10 years ago. It can feel deeply painful, demoralizing, to realize how slow we are moving, but nonetheless, people are moving, fighting, and sometimes winning. Recently, a Montana judge ruled in favor of 16 young climate activists who sued the state over their right to a healthy environment. Yeah. Just this week, the fight for a Green New Deal continues in a historic victory from the Sunrise Movement and so many other national climate coalitions. We heard the president announce the creation of the Civilian Climate Corps, which will put thousands of young people to work fighting the climate crisis, decreasing carbon emissions, and helping communities recover from climate disaster and more. And on the afternoon of the second day of Rosh Hashanah, 75,000 people, including so many of you in this room, gathered in the streets in front of the UN Climate Summit to demand that the president and other world leaders commit to ending our reliance on fossil fuels. Critical work is happening now. I think action breeds hope. I think that facing our grief and moving towards action can create a sense of renewal and possibility. And I also think it's okay if you don't feel that way. If hope feels distant, if hope feels impossible. Grief and fear do not have to abate in order to keep going, to keep fighting, to keep lessening suffering here and now. Action is what's needed, not emotional clarity, because there is so much we can and must do, and we must do it now. As Kolotnik Cynthia Friedman said in a recent Jewish Currents article, quoting another Jewish Currents article by Kate Aronoff, the fabulous journalist and climate writer, Aronoff reminds us that every 10th of a degree translates to tens of thousands of lives lost. So every little incremental step we can take to mitigate climate change matters a tremendous amount. There is no point at which you can say we might as well just give up. There is still plenty of suffering that can be prevented. There is no point at which we say we give up. And what's more, there is no point at which we can give up, and we cannot wait until we are no longer grieving or numb. We cannot wait until we feel good, until we have no more doubt or fear or shame. We cannot wait to find the perfect organizations or perfect tactics in order to act together collectively en masse now. Which brings me back to Gia Tolentino's essay on climate despair. In it, Tolentino speaks with climate activists in the Philippines facing the terror and devastation of catastrophic flooding. One activist, Natasha Tanjukdo, says that Westerners always seem to be looking for a linear course of action, quote, to figure out how to feel, then figure out how to act, then act. But here we just act, and we feel things during, we feel things after, and then we act again. I think there is so much power in this lesson, and perhaps there is some similar power and similar lesson in the arc of this holy season and the prescribed order of ancient rituals that take us through it. As I've said, this process is supposed to begin on Tisha B'Av, the holiday where we mark the destruction of the temple, and traditionally, people sit in the dark, read the devastating book of Eicha, or Lamentations. We tear our clothing, we weep out loud, people shout out of their grief. We open our hearts to feel all of the destruction, the vulnerability. But then collectively, we get up off the ground. We don't wait to feel hopeful. We don't wait until we are actually convinced it will be okay. We get up. We don't deny or judge what we feel, but regardless of what we feel, we get up off the ground on Tisha B'Av, and Tisha B'Av ends. And then we keep moving towards the days of awe and towards this night, when we commit how we want to live the rest of the year. And if, during this year, we start to feel stuck, if we cannot recognize the remnants that can still be lifted up, the things that can be remade in our own hands, then, instead of turning to shame and instead of giving up, may we turn again and again and again to the pedagogues, to the people who have shown us before that none of us are alone and that there is still so much that can be done. In time, may we each access that capacity within ourselves. May we witness it in one another, in our personal lives and collectively. And because I am leaving this beautiful community shortly after the last days of our holidays, I want to leave you with this as one of my final words. Do not give up. Do not give up. Do not give up in the fight for our planet. We cannot give up in the fight together against environmental racism. Do not give up. Do not give up on the coming generations in their right to a healthy planet and in their right to bodily autonomy and to the more liberated world they deserve. Accept the realities of this moment. Accept the destruction that cannot be undone. But search for what still can be remade, what can be saved, and even what can be radically transformed, just as our ancestors radically transformed their world before us. This year, may we keep going, each of us teachers, each of us willing to be taught, and like the pedagogue, may we find the song that is prayer, the song that is action, the song that is hiding in the wreckage, waiting somehow to be heard. Gemar Chatima Tovah, may you be sealed in the book of life.
those words give us a sense of what lies upon us, what is upon us, what is our duty. And that is exactly the first word of the prayers and texts that bring us into the end of our service. Aleinu, this is what is upon us. We have heard an inspiration inviting us to recognize duty. As we're able and comfortable in body and spirit and heart, gathered here and at home, please rise, page 117.
Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, l'teit gedula lioseh bereshit, shehu noteh shamayim v'yosed haaretz, u'moshav yikaro b'shamayim hima'al, u'shchinatu zo b'govei meromim, hu Eloheinu einod, v'anachnu korim, ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. על כן נקבל לך אדוני אלוהינו לראות מהרה בתפארת עוזך, לתקן עולם במלכות שדי. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו
Please be seated. We approach the words of Kaddish, Kaddish Yatam. And Kaddish embraces a paradox. We think of God and God's name, at least in traditional metaphor, as being infinitely great, as being great beyond anything that can be improved upon, as infinite. And yet Kaddish says, Yitkadal v'yitkadash, let it become greater and more holy. It means that God, even in this ancient traditional text, God is envisaged as finite and diminished. And it is our affirming the words of Kaddish, inspired by memories of those who have died, who have departed this life. We affirm in Kaddish our duty that the world and God's name can become greater and more holy, which is the duty devolving upon us. I remind us briefly, of course, that tomorrow a part of the journey of Yom Kippur is into the theme of Yizkor, of remembrance. And it is the custom of this community. Please, as we gather tomorrow, here in person, or wherever we might be in livestream, to have close at hand a photo, an image, or an object that will remind you of the person or the people that you are remembering in that moment. But now we are gathered here. Please let me first invite those who are remembering and mourning a death that took place in the past weeks or months or this past year. If you are in any of those traditional times of mourning, please rise. And let me also invite to rise those who this day, or in some day close to this day, recall a yahrzeit, the anniversary of death of anyone close to you who died at this time in years gone by. So to all those here and in live stream, rising as we're able, share aloud just quietly in your place the names of those who will be in your heart as we turn to the words of Kaddish. And those who have the personal custom to rise to say Kaddish on every occasion, please also rise in body and spirit. We turn to the words of Mourner's Kaddish on page 122 and remind us that the word that is repeated only in these 10 days of La'ela, inviting us to bring our hearts and our memories even higher. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah v'yalma divrach hiruteh v'yamlich malchuteh v'chayechon v'yamechon uv'chaye dechol beit Yisrael ba'agala uv'zman kariv v'yimaru Amen. Yehei shemei rabbah mevarach le'alam u'lalmei almayah Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yithalal shemei dekudsha b'richu le'ela u'le'ela mikol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata damiran b'yalama v'yimaru Amen. Yehei shalama rabba min Shemaya, v'chayim malenu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimaru Amen. Oseh shalom b'mramav, hu ya'aseh shalom. Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'al kol yoshvei tevel, v'yimaru Amen. And thinking of the blessing of memory, I invite all of us to rise, turning to the Hebrew words, Zichronam Livracha, may their memories be a blessing.
Zichrono Livracha, Zichrono Livracha, Zichrono Livracha, we are blessed, remembering you. Zichrono Livracha, Zichrono Livracha, Zichrono Livracha, we are blessed, remembering you. You can have a seat.
Please be seated. So, the things that we need to remind ourselves, each other about. Number one, join Kolot. If you didn't already, if you did, you're good for another 11 and a half months. If you didn't, do it now. And if you're thinking about it or fixing, there's a prospective members gathering in our Sukkah. The powers of destruction are out there. I'm telling you, they are manifest. But we can prevail. Sukkah, prospective members, see? In the park on Sukkot. Many of you submitted names for the booklet that we'll share during Yizkor. And You can find it on the High Holiday section of the website. Please continue to share Metro cards so that we can give the gift of travel and journey to those who are so much in need of the ability to be and to travel around the points in their lives that give meaning and richness. And the holidays are not over. Sign up for all things Sukkot, from Erev Sukkot in our Sukkah, the Gemulot Chasadim group, queer and trans and friends, Shabbat potluck, all next week. You find it all on the website. Following morning service tomorrow, we heed the call of the Haftarah, and there'll be a Dalded with Ricky Blum and organizers from 13th forward. Following that, take a little more time. We'll dive into challenging texts, trust me. And from 3:30 to 4:30, having heard Hadara Huvia chant Kol Nidre, she will be leading song and chant. And then we gather back here at 5 for Yizkor, leading us in that journey through the slow closing but not ultimate barring of the gates at Ne'ilah, and a mini, it's not breakfast, it's break fast. Yeah, whatever, in the atrium. If there's any more announcements, share them in the atrium. The custom of the community is in a moment that we have the musical gifts of Thijs Sitterman to lead us more deeply, just for a few moments, into the arena of contemplation, so that we're able, as we listen to those melodies, as our hearts are opened, our minds are challenged, to find the moment that feels right and to leave, to find our way out quietly. It's not such an easy Jewish concept, but we can do it. We can listen loud, but let us do it quietly and be aware of the blessings of our presence, our hearts, our souls, our voices. Ligmor Chatima Tovah. May we all enter that process with each other and with ourselves, that's harder, to find our way, to be guided to a good and a smooth conclusion of this work.